Hey, it's Joe Glines, the Automator, and during the Hero call earlier this morning, we came upon a really great lesson where in one of our own scripts, we had a function that would sometimes return a map and sometimes return basically a binary, zero or true. And so this was a really powerful lesson. So if you're using functions or classes, you need to understand they should normally return one thing, and whatever that thing is, could be an object, an array, or whatever. We show you this is a great visual of understanding the why and what goes wrong when you don't do that. So enjoy the video. Again, it's an extract from our hero call. It's a typical thing we talk about on Fridays and Saturdays with our hero members. Check it out. See you soon. Cheers.
The point here, what this is saying here, the display variable. So if you can see down here, display device name, this right here.
Right.
That should be a map that contains device names and stuff like that. But somehow it is not a map. It is instead a number. And that's why this thing is breaking. What we would have to do is look up where this is being defined, where is display being defined, and verify if it is defined properly. I think, Irfan, you remember that you were working on this? Very likely the function that defines the display variable is sometimes returning a map, and in other times is returning a number. And that's what the problem is. So it should always return a map. And if it is going to be zero, it should be an empty map. That's what it's supposed to return. It should always be a map.
And which is what I was going to say, and maybe we still have the same issue or not, but we should have before, Ray, we should have looked carefully at the error you were getting and then displayed an actual thing saying it looks like your monitors are connecting through a hub and we can't see.
For example.
Right. So I don't know if this is the same errors that we had before, but
right.
Regardless, we shouldn't have what we see on your screen, right? We should program around it.
Right. Let me go ahead and quickly, you can stop sharing there. Let me see real quick, active monitor scaling, right? Let's see.
This is one of my favorite scripts, by the way.
Yeah.
All the time.
Okay, let me show you. So what we do in this case here, well, that is interesting. So here's what I was talking about. First of all, that's interesting here. So we have this function that creates an array. It goes through this enumeration loop. And for each display, it pushes the name and the display device ID. So this is the one that is failing. It's the display here. Because what we're looking for is that this function should return a map so that I could access the device name and the device ID. It should be a map. When I go down here to look at that function, which is the enumerate display devices, you will notice that sometimes it returns false. See that? So that's a number. So that means that in certain situations, it will sometimes return a map, but sometimes it will return a number, which is incorrect. In this case, it should always return a map, and it should be empty in this case, right? But out here, I have to also say if display has device name or display has device ID, and basically I want to do the opposite. If it doesn't have it, all right? If it doesn't have any of that, I will continue. Basically, that would fix the error. Why? Because I'm going to get the device here, but sometimes it's going to be empty. And if it is empty, it will not have the device name and it will not have the device ID. If that happens, if I don't have a device name or a device ID, I could ignore it or log it or do something else. Right now, I'm just ignoring. But this fixes both issues. We could have on the also just said not here. If not display, whoops, I could continue here, because remember, this thing was returning false. So if it is false, I could ignore it as well. That's another way of doing it. But I don't like that particular idea because, again, we're returning two different things. In one, we're returning false, and in the other one, we're returning an object. So, but both are okay. You can say, if I didn't get anything, continue, ignore it. Or if the map is not what I'm expecting it to be, ignore it. That's okay. Before I do this, which, David, this is what I was mentioning before about checking for assumptions. Right now, what was happening here is that the code here is just assuming that we got a map, and we are just assuming that it has a device name in it. And in here, we're assuming that it has the device ID. All of those are three different assumptions very quickly right there. And it doesn't look like it. And again, for very simple scripts, who cares? But as soon as you start giving the code to somebody else, yeah. For example, this script worked on Joe's computer. It worked on Irfan's computer. It worked on Rizwa's computer. It worked on mine. It just so happens that it doesn't work on Ray's. So that's where checking for assumptions is always kind of like better in the end. Because as soon as you give this code to other people, yeah, you're going to find a lot of your assumptions being broken over and over again. So consistency, always consistent returning. If you're returning maps, you should always return maps. Well, and always check that your stuff is what it's supposed. If display not count, in this case, I can do that too. If the count is that, I can ignore. I cannot always assume that I have what I need. It could happen that I don't, you know?
And that's a really, really good lesson. The other thing I was going to say is this, and I think Sean does this, but he's one of the few people like in AutoHotkey that does this. And I think Irfan was one that kind of created these things, right? Had he, had a naming convention that kind of used the letters map or something at the beginning of it when he's returning it, it would have helped him remember this is a map. Like the thing I'm returning is a map. And if you called it something with that name, that's what, using certain letters or something to help you remember what that thing actually is. It's an object or, whatnot, or a variable or a string. It really helps you avoid issues like this. I can't tell you how many times I've heard Isaias talk about this topic of like, you're returning different things. Sometimes it's, a binary thing, like integer, or a map or an array or whatever. And that's where I'd say, even though I don't love doing it myself, if we used a couple letters in the variable name or whatever it is, it would help us remember that, like, well, wait a minute, why am I calling that thing a map when it's a 0? Like, that doesn't make sense.
Right.